We're live. Go ahead and start the session. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you everyone for joining today. Before I hand it over to our awesome speakers who you joined to see, we have a quick presentation on the tools for schools. Just so you don't miss this resource, we're doing a short overview of it at each of the sessions. So I apologize if it's a repeat for some of you, but we'll try to make it quick. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, you all should be able to see my screen there. So this is our Liverpool Schools homepage. And first of all, hi, my name is Sam. I'm with the County of San Diego Health and Human Services Agency, or as we call it, HHSA. And I'm just going to give you a quick overview of this resource, especially for those of you who are working with students in schools, after school programs, or community-based organizations. And the Tools for Schools resource database was created by our Liverpool Schools team with the goal of essentially providing information and resources to meet the immediate needs of our students, staff, and families, and also to provide some information and data analysis to support the longer term planning for healthy schools. And based on feedback, this tool used to be a printed resource and is now online, so it is searchable and a lot easier to use. So again, you see the homepage here. And just to point out, I'll put the link in the chat. We're going to be using the conference feed loop chat if you're able to access that. And up here at the top, you can see at this gray bar, we have focus areas of health equity, wellness policies, social emotional wellness, childhood obesity, chronic absenteeism. So those are focus areas. And then how we actually put those into action are in the strategies of policy, partnership programs, and local control and accountability plans, or LCAPs. So this is the homepage. If you scroll down, there's some information you can read on your own time if you're interested, and you'll click the Tools for Schools searchable database, and that'll take you to this page here. And this is our tool essentially. So it has some information up here. You can email Pam Smith if you have any ideas or suggestions as to resources that we can include in this database. But how you use it is you can select how many entries you want to see per page. So you can select up to 100 entries per page if you'd like. You can search key terms like equity or parenting, if I can spell that correctly. And you'll see the resources pop up with that keyword. There's going to be a link to the resource, a short description, and topics that it covers in English and Spanish. So we have over 330 resources currently in there, and we'll always be updating this and really use this as a resource for you all in your work. So that is pretty much an overview. Again, I'll put the link in the chat. And then I also wanted to just quickly share a little bit of a sneak preview is that there's going to be some funding coming from HHSA and the San Diego County Office of Education. They're going to be providing grants from, I believe it is $50,000 to $250,000 for eligible public schools and districts to implement health education for grades K through 12, with the goal of helping to develop health literate students. So SDCOE is planning on opening those applications for funding this December. So more information can be found by emailing Paige Metz, and I'll put her email in the chat as well. So I know that was a lot, but again, I'll link everything in the chat and I'll hand it over to our amazing speakers. Thanks.
Thank you, Sam, and good afternoon, everybody. I will say that we're super excited to be here today. And I know that people come to webinars so that they don't have to be on camera and they can be off, but we would rather talk with you than at you. So if you are a brave soul who would be willing to turn your camera on, we'd love to make this interactive. If you can't or don't want to, we get it. But if you can or are willing to, we'd love to be able to speak with you. My name is Aisha Pope. I am with San Diego Center for Children. I'm a program director at a program called FAST, where we service children in foster care with behavioral health services.
All right, good afternoon. I'm also happy to be here with you all today and glad that you showed up. And my name is LaTysa Flowers. I am the founder and owner of Parents Empowerment Services, where we do advocacy and we connect families and youth to strategies and tools that help them be successful at school, at home, and in their communities. And thank you. So if you're here today and you wanted to come to the Centering Dignity Through Connectedness session, you are in the right place. And so we're going to talk a bit about how dignity promotes connectedness and how when you don't promote dignity or you discourage children, it can disrupt their brilliance. And as you can see on this slide, we say a misbehaving child is often a discouraged child, which comes from some philosophy in Adlerian and individual psychology. And we just want to continue to just keep that in mind as we go through our session today about how we connect to one another. So I want to greet you all in a way that makes me feel connected. And we want to bring into the room some of who I am and who Aisha is. And so Salbona is a welcome, a call and response that says, I see you. So in South African Swahili, you can say, I see you. And it's important for us to, one, understand that we are seen. And two, we want to make sure that you know that we also see you. And when we say see you, we're not just saying with our eyes, but that we see you as an individual. We see your humanity. So I'm going to say Salbona to Aisha, and Aisha's going to say,
Able so bonus, LaTysa.
right.
And,
So
I see you seeing me. We see you seeing us.
yes. And all of who I am sees her. So the divine sees her, I see her, and the divine sees us seeing one another. And so that's how we like to greet each other. And we would invite you, if you want to come off of mute and just greet each other in your native tongue, whatever that is, as if you've seen an old friend or an old cousin, and just greet them. And I'll give you the count of 3. 1, 2, and 3.
Hey, y'all.
Hey, girl. Hey. So,
All right.
So what do we need in this space? One of the things that we want to do is, one, acknowledge that we are all living on borrowed land, land that was unceded, does not belong to us, but actually belongs to the First Nations people. And in San Diego County, where I live and work, that is the land of the Kumeyaay. And so I just want to acknowledge that. Some things we haven't got right in this country, and that's one of those things, but I want to acknowledge that. I also want to bring into the room the idea of the Sankofa bird, and that being the egg or the jewel that's in its mouth is something that they are bringing from the past while their feet are planted in the future or in the present, right? So something of value that we can bring from our past and we can plant it right here. And some of what we believe that to be is some of our historical context around race, equity. We want to bring those things into the room where they can have value. Thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about cognitive dissonance. So Frantz Fanon is a philosopher, a sociologist, a psychologist of Black psychology. And he says that some people hold a core belief that is very strong. And when they are presented with evidence that goes against that belief, the new evidence cannot be accepted. It would create a feeling of extreme discomfort called cognitive dissonance. And because it is so important to protect the core belief that they will rationalize, ignore, and even deny anything that doesn't fit with the core belief. And so this is not a thought. This is a belief. This is something that you affirm with or you identify with as being a part of your being, a part of who you are, your identity. And so when you have something that is a core belief, and you identify that as part of your being every day, and you come into contact with information that goes against that, then you can feel physical discomfort in your body. And oftentimes when we're talking about things around social justice, cultural responsiveness, that has to do with harms that were committed or things that happen to certain groups of people, we do feel uncomfortable because that may not be what we knew to be true, or that might not be a truth that we identify with. However, it is the experience of many people. And so I would ask that you lean into some of that discomfort and get the learning, okay? And just allow the information to sit with you. And one thing I pride myself on is that I'm not a thief. So I'm not going to steal your opportunity to learn. So if any of these things are of question to you, I would invite you to go and explore them yourself. Next slide, please. So this
Which
video
doll is the black doll? And which one is the white doll?
That one.
Which doll is the pretty doll? Which doll is the nice doll? Which doll is the bad doll? Which doll is the nice doll? And which doll is the bad doll? And why is that doll pretty?
Because she's white and she has 2 eyes.
Which doll is the ugly doll? Why is that doll ugly?
Because he's black.
Which doll looks most like you?
Like me.
Yeah, which one looks like you?
And that one,
Okay.
that doll.
All right, thank you. Thank you for sitting with me with that. And it's disheartening to see children make these or identify with things that are perceived to be negative about their own cultural identity and their skin color. So in the 1940s, psychologists Kenneth and Mamie Clark, they designed and conducted a series of experiments known as the doll test. And so this doll test looked at the psychological effects or impact that it had on Black children. And it was also used in the historical ruling of Brown versus the Board of Education, which was the famous separate is not equal, or separate but equal ruling that caused schools to be integrated. And what they didn't do was they didn't look at the psychological impact that these type of notions around skin color and race, the impact that it had on white children. The other thing that did not happen was that they did not support Black educators. So it kind of set up this ideal that children could only receive a appropriate or proper education if they were educated by white folks. And we know that that's not true. But what the ruling said was that to separate children from others of similar age and qualifications solely based on their race generates a feeling of inferiority as to their status in the community that may affect their hearts and minds in a way unlikely to ever be undone. So when we other children and when we really promote these pronounced differences amongst children based on their race, it does something to them psychologically. It does something to all children psychologically, but it does something that this ruling says is most likely to never be undone. So we know that it was not necessarily separate but equal, because what we did was place children in environments where they were not celebrated or accepted, but that they were bullied, tormented, ridiculed, and verbally and physically abused by their educators and administrators back in those days. And so this has had a long-lasting impact even to this day. The notion that Black children can only be appropriately educated by educators that are not of color. And so we know that not to be true. Next slide, please. So what is bias? So I'm pretty sure that most of you have encountered these definitions. So this definition is a prejudice, and we all have biases. I prefer chocolate, okay? And so that's a bias that I have. And I, don't really care for strawberry that much. But anyhow, but when you have a bias, it can cause you to have an inclination for or against a person in addition to a thing. Next slide, please.
I know you didn't like strawberry. I really like strawberry.
Girl, no. So W.E.B. Du Bois was an African-American civil rights activist. And he was also the first African-American to receive his PhD in psychology, and he was a founding member of the NAACP. And he has this quote: "We continually judge the whole from the part we are familiar with." And we know this by things that we see. Some people do not have the experience or the worldview of coming from a community of color or from a marginalized group. And so they don't have that experience. So they tend to judge the whole based on the part that they're familiar with. Next slide, please. So explicit bias are attitudes and beliefs that we have about a person or group on a conscious level. So these are things that we are clearly aware of, what we're thinking, what we're doing, how we are engaging. Next slide, please. But implicit bias is the more dangerous bias. It refers to the attitudes, stereotypes, that affect our actions and understanding on an unconscious way. And so by that, I mean, sometimes there are societal norms and ways of being that we just avert to, right? We just go with that. And so this is the type of bias that is more harmful because we may not be aware of it. It may just become a norm. Next slide, please. And then racial bias is a form of implicit bias that is more specific to the attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions based on someone's racial presentation. Next slide. And so Walter Gilliam did a research or a study, and it was a Yale research study where they tracked the gaze of preschool teachers or early educators. And what they did, they had an exhibit and they asked them to look at the children's behaviors and to let them know, indicate when they saw behaviors that could become problematic. The only thing was that there were no children that were having challenging behaviors. It was just all, it was all just an experiment. But what they didn't tell them either was that they were wearing goggles that tracked for how long and where they looked for the challenging behaviors. And these are the results that came back. So they looked longer and more often in the direction of Black boys. And they were looking for problematic behaviors when there were no problematic behaviors present. Next slide, please. So there is an intersection that is race, gender, and neurodiversity, right? So if you're an African-American or Black or brown male and you have a disability, then there's a more likelihood that you will be suspended, expelled from school at some point. And there's also there's a higher incidence that you will end up in special education. So this slide right here is very hard to see. And so we're gonna just place the link to it in the chat. And it looks at how race and trauma show up in the classroom. And so that you can, maybe identify it, because if you can identify it, then you can probably resolve some of that. Next slide, please. So the implicit bias in the early education classrooms, we found, or there's research and study that says when teachers don't have the same or similar worldview and they have limited access or experience with different cultures, that this is how implicit bias continues to show up in that environment. So teachers need more access. They need more culturally responsive training that gives them more experience and exposure to other cultures outside of just academia. So do early childhood educators have implicit bias regarding sex and race? Yeah, according to the Yale Child Studies Center, yes. And there are other research that you can explore that will will help you to understand how our own worldview and experiences, and when we bring them with us, they impact the relationships that we have with children and their families. Next slide, please. So here's a little clip.
As educators, we are all deeply invested in creating positive experiences for our students. However, we now know that no one is immune to holding implicit biases that may adversely affect students, despite our best intentions. These biases can have a huge impact on our students' outcomes. To illustrate, let's explore what the research says about how teachers' perceptions of students' academic achievement is altered by implicit bias by looking at 2 studies. In the first study, children, accompanied by their caregivers, came into a research lab. Researchers watched and recorded the child's level of imaginative play with a set of toys. Imaginative play was ranked on a 1 to 5 scale from low to high, based on how creative the themes were within the child's pretend play. Additionally, teachers filled out reports about the students, which indicated whether they perceived the student to be prepared for school and the degree of conflict between that student and their peers. Upon examination, researchers found that ratings of imagination-based play differed based on the student's race. For Black students, those with highly imaginative play were rated as less prepared and less accepted by their peers. However, if the student was white, imaginative play was related to positive ratings in the same criteria. Without realizing it, the teachers in the study evaluated the same behavior differently based on the student's race. A second study examined the implicit biases of teachers in culturally diverse schools. A large group of white teachers filled out questionnaires about their experiences with white and Arab students in their classroom. Teachers also took an online assessment to measure whether they had a favorable or unfavorable inclination towards white or Arab students. Don't worry, we'll have more on this assessment in a later module. What's important to know is that the results of the study revealed a connection between positive implicit bias, educators' teaching styles, and engagement with students. In particular, those teachers with a pro-white bias were more likely to take a teach-to-the-test approach with non-white students instead of helping them master the content, compared to their approach with white students. But don't worry, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. The researchers also found that by using culturally responsive teaching methods, such as promoting mutual respect and resolving race-related conflicts, teachers were able to mitigate the effects of their biases. This goes to show that even though biases can be automatic and unconscious, they can still be inhibited.
You're muted.
So the impact of these implicit bias is something that can put a family and child on the trajectory to the preschool to prison pipeline. And then this is a metaphor that is used to describe the progression of early education or early learning environment removals of children and how it has a direct link to the trajectory to the correctional system. Next slide, please. So I know many of us have seen this, but if a child doesn't know how to read, what do? We teach. If a child doesn't know how to swim, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to multiply, we teach. And if a child doesn't know how to drive, I don't teach, but somebody teaches. And if a child doesn't know how to behave, what do? Most often the response is we punish. And punishment is something you do to a child, whereas discipline is something that you do for the child, something that you teach the child. So why can't we find the last sentence as easily to answer as the others? But at the end of the day, when a child doesn't know how to do something, we should not be expelling them or excluding them from their learning environment. We should be teaching skills. Next slide, please.
Well, LaTysa and I are teachers, and we teach parents from a model called Positive Discipline, which is based in Adlerian psychology, which LaTysa mentioned early, Adlerian individual, which should be indivisible psychology. And in Adlerian theory and positive discipline, we believe that the primary goal of all people is to gain a sense of belonging and significance. So belonging is the sense that I fit in. that I belong here, that somebody wants me here, and that I matter here. Significance is a sense that I'm capable and contributing. And the way that we help people feel like they're contributing is by giving them tasks or meaningful work to do. That is something that makes sense, has a point, and actually contributes to the greater good. So everybody, in order to feel like they belong somewhere, has to be giving back to that environment in some way. And children are born hardwired to contribute, and then we tend to kind of socialize it out of them. I'm going to show a quick video of some children contributing.
Oh. Oh. So. So. Einmal hier und einmal. Oh.
Hi.
Ah, ja. So. Hä? Oh. 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 So. Oh. Ah, super. Kann ich wieder umrühren.
I'm going to ask those of you who were watching that video to tell me what you noticed. So you can just come off of mute and tell me what you noticed as you were watching these kiddos in these scenarios. What did you notice?
Not sure if the participants are able to come off mute. If they are, that'd be great.
Are you able to come off mute? I've seen people be off mute. You're not able to come off mute. Are you able to put it in the chat?
Just as a reminder, the chat is in the conference platform. So if you're viewing this as full screen, you may not be able to see it, but there's a chat. We've put a couple links in there.
Okay, so I will tell you what I noticed then. What I noticed is that the kids helped spontaneously. They did not have to be asked to help. They just saw a need and they met that need. I noticed that after they helped, they made eye contact with the grown-up to basically say, like, are we good? Like, I helped you out. Are we good now? I also noticed that the two adults in the room, every time that there were two adults in the room, that the two adults in the room not only did they not give direction, but they did not jump to solve the problem. In each of those cases, the adults could have solved the problem way quicker than the children could solve the problem on their own. But the adults did not jump to solve the problem. They waited and they gave the children a chance to solve the problem. And when we give children a beat, a breath, a moment to try to solve a problem on their own, they will come up with it. But how often do we actually give children a chance to solve problems on their own? I see one person shaking their head no. And I would imagine that if everybody else was off camera, they'd be saying that we don't often do that. Why? Because it's inefficient. Who's got time to wait for a toddler to figure out the solution to a problem that we could solve in 1.2 seconds? Nobody has time to do that. The problem with that, though, is that you're going to be solving problems for your 17-year-old and your 25-year-old and your 33-year-old if you don't give them an opportunity when they're younger to learn and understand how to solve problems on their own. So what we want to do is to actually make space, to give kids room to be able to solve their problems, to give them a minute to think, to get the sense that they are capable from having had an opportunity to contribute without interference. So when we think about how you build a healthy human, there are steps that have to be taken to the building of a healthy human. So first, healthy humans have to understand causal thinking. Causal thinking is when I do this, this causes this reaction. So when a toddler or a 6-month-old drops a spoon off of their high chair and it clangs on the floor, and then they do it a bunch of times, what they're doing is they're testing causal thinking. The last time I dropped it, a pretty design of orange carrots went all over the floor. Let's see if that happens every time. That noise was kind of fun. Let's see if that noise happens every time. So what they want to know is that when I do something, there's a reaction to it. Even younger than that, when I cry, does somebody show up? So I have learned that crying causes somebody to come and help. Based on their experiences with causal thinking, A leads to B leads to C, they start to understand and learn to develop trust. So if I cry and somebody comes and that happens predictably, I can assume that the people who are here to take care of me are people that I can trust. When I am able to trust the people around me, when I feel cared for, I can start to care for other people. So that's the beginnings of developing a conscience. And when I can trust the people around me and I care about them and I know that they care about me, then I can start delaying gratification. So if every time I say, can I have something to eat? The person says, yes, but wait 1 minute. And then 1 minute later, I have something to eat. Then if the person says, wait 5 minutes, I can assume that that's a truth, that if I actually wait 5 minutes, I'm going to get food in 5 minutes. But if that need is not predictably met, then when my preschool teacher says lunch is at noon, I don't believe that person. I don't believe that preschool teacher because lunch is never predictable. So if I feel hungry right now, the idea that I could wait to eat is scary to me. My body is going into shutdown or fear or fight or flight because I don't know if I'm going to eat and I don't know if I can believe you or trust you when you say that lunch is in 20 minutes, besides the fact that I don't even know what 20 minutes means. So these are basic, these blue blocks down at the bottom are basic building blocks. This is what we build all the rest of healthy human on top of. After that, we learn how to socialize, we learn how to be in relationship with other people, we learn how to handle and manage our stress, we learn how to concentrate, we start to learn who we are and who we are in relation to other people, and then we can go ahead and learn that 1 + 2 = 3, right? The problem is some of us are getting students into our schools who don't have basic building blocks. They have not come from an environment that has been reliable. They don't understand causal thinking. They cannot delay gratification. They don't have basic trust in the adults around them. They don't know how to show caring for other people because caring hasn't been shown for them. And now we want to teach them 1 + 2 = 3 without understanding these basic building blocks. So the way that this causal thinking is formed is from the very earliest stages. We have little bitty babies. They are at some point in their day in a relaxed state. And then they have a need. The kind of needs that little babies have include things like being hungry, being wet, being cold, being sleepy. So they express that need by crying because that's the only way they know how to do that. So that crying is their arousal in this bottom right corner. And in a perfect world, that need is met, and then they're able to relax again. And that process happens over and over and over again throughout the day. Now, once or twice, they might have to cry a little bit longer. Maybe in the middle of the night, we don't hear them right away, but their primary experience is that this need is met more often than it's not. And so I'm getting into this cycle of understanding where I believe that my needs are going to be predictably met. So as a child, I'm going to probably be feeling, if you guys could come off of mute, I'd be asking you this, but I'm gonna think with you or for you in this moment. I'd be feeling loved. I'd be feeling like I matter. I'd be thinking that caregivers are helpful and responsible and predictable. And therefore, because when I am 6 months old or 1 year old, the world is just as big as the grownups and the other kids that are right in front of me. It's not like I understand what's going on in the Middle East when I'm 1 year old. I just understand what's going on in my house. So I'm going to extrapolate from what's going on in my house what is going on in the rest of the world. So if the grownups in my house are predictable and safe, then the world must be predictable and safe. And therefore, I am okay to go off into the world and explore because the world is predictable and safe. But what happens when that infant expresses a need and that need is not met? So they are aroused, they are crying, and that need is not met, and their distress just ramps up, and that need is still not met, and their distress just ramps up. And that's the pattern, or that's the cycle that happens over and over and over again. Now, this kid is going to feel a lot of things, maybe scared, maybe unloved, maybe like they don't matter. They're going to think caregivers are inconsistent. They don't care about me. They are not able or willing to meet my needs. The world, therefore, the world now is preschool that we're walking into, or kindergarten or second grade. The world, therefore, is not trustworthy. The world, therefore, is unable or unwilling to meet my needs. And so I am perhaps unlovable, I am rebellious, I am ready to fight, or I am going to take what I need because I cannot trust that these adults that are around me are going to give it to me. Okay. So we talked about those basic building blocks, those blue blocks. If we don't do what we need to do, especially in our early care settings, to build up those building blocks so that those are nice and firm and we can put the other things on top of them, we're going to have kids that are trying to get intellectual potential, kids that are trying to learn that 1 + 2 = 3, when they don't even understand that something, that A + B = C, you know? So we need to figure out ways that we build up these blue blocks. So those foundational skills can be done, can be built up in many ways. So basic trust, you know, the first one that comes from understanding that A leads to B leads to C. One of the best ways that we can do that in school is by having predictable routines and following a predictable routine. By letting the kids know when there's going to be a change in the routine. So usually we do morning circle, then we do snack, then we go outside, but today it's raining. So I'm gonna let you know, even though you might be thinking, obviously we're not going outside, it's raining. We're going to let you know that first we're gonna do morning snack, first we're gonna do circle, then we're gonna go do morning snack. And since it's raining, instead we're going to do this. So we're not pulling this new part of the routine out at the last minute. Most kids will benefit from this, but your kids who are struggling the most really need it. It's not just that they benefit from it, it's that they really need it. We're going to be consistent and reliable in the relationship. We're going to talk to them in the same way and show love and care, regardless of how they're acting or regardless of how we're feeling. We sometimes walk into our spaces and it's been a bad day. It is not our kids' responsibility to give us space when we've had a bad day. It's our responsibility to decide what we need to do for ourselves so that we can show up for them in the way that we are expected to. We need to base our relationships in dignity. That is that each person is equally worthy, that equity is centered, and that all of the people that we're serving, the small children up to their parents, that each of those people are people of value and worth, and that we need to treat them as such. And that we need to be kind, but we also need to be firm, because inconsistency or wishy-washiness is also very scary for children. So we don't want to be wishy-washy either. We need to get to know children and we need to get to know their families, understanding their stories and their histories, because it helps us understand where they've come from and what they're bringing into the classroom. The causal thinking piece of this, we need to ask kids to help them understand sometimes why they do what they do. And we often want to ask them, why did you? Why is a very hard question to answer. And because there is some expectation that they have the right answer, we may not have an expectation that they have the right answer, but every time somebody asks you a question, you think that they think you should know. And if they say they don't know, then they get in trouble for saying they don't know. So they have to make something up. They don't actually know why. So instead of asking why, we ask what and how. So what were you hoping would happen? You know, how did this experience land for you? Or how do you think we could change this? So we don't ask why, we ask what or how. We provide choices. Those choices may need to be limited because You know, it's a classroom. They can't do everything they want to do, but we do provide choices. And we focus on solutions, not blame or shame or punishment for what has already happened. Helping people develop a conscience has to do with helping people to see other people and see other people's perspectives. So again, what and how questions are helpful for that. Class meetings and positive discipline we do with younger kids every day, and 15 or 20 minutes or so, maybe even shorter than that. And that's when they sit in a circle for equity, and everybody has a chance to speak. They have a chance to give compliments. They have a chance to problem solve together. They have a chance to plan together for things that they want to happen within their class in the future. Helping kids to build empathy. First, you listen to them, and then they will feel listened to. Respecting that each child is different and unique, and that they bring something different and unique to your classroom, and that everything that they bring is valuable. And the parts of it that feel hard to cope with, we have to figure out ways to make that gift show up in a way that works in a classroom. Not to squelch that gift of rambunctiousness, but how to figure out how to help that gift show up in the classroom in a way that works for the classroom. And ability to delay gratification, again, routines. If every day lunch happens at noon, that kid that's bugging you from 10 to 12 about lunch is eventually going to be like, okay, actually, when this teacher says we're going to have lunch at noon, we actually do have lunch at noon. Being consistent, focusing your relationships on dignity and respect, class meetings, and also understanding that mistakes are going to happen, and that we learn from mistakes, and that we teach children that they can learn from mistakes versus punishing them for making mistakes. So children who are deeply discouraged are going to have a hard time doing academics. They're going to have a hard time problem solving. They're going to have a hard time paying attention because they're worried about the boogeyman at the door. They're going to have a hard time with consequences. And they're not always going to trust that the consequence you're going to deliver, if you choose to deliver a consequence, is going to be safe. So oftentimes the consequences that they have experienced have been really unsafe or unreasonable or unfair consequences. So even if you did have a consequence that felt reasonable or safe, just the idea that a consequence is coming could be completely scary and dysregulating to a child who's had a really hard time in the past. They're going to have a harder time reading social cues because they haven't been paid attention to. So they also probably haven't been paying attention to others in order to read their social cues. So they're going to have a harder time with that. And they also have a harder time accurately perceiving safety. So that thing that we just talked about, that I just talked about, where if there is a discussion about a consequence, and in positive discipline, we don't do consequences, at least hardly ever. If there's a discussion about a consequence, their mind will go to such extremes because their experience has been that consequences are very extreme in their life. So for students who over-perceive danger, students who are scared that they're going to be hurt in school, routines are really important. Posting schedules, practicing transitions, not just having good transitions, but practicing those transitions. So let's pretend that it's time to go outside. Everybody do what we're going to do when it's time to go outside, and then we work on that together. Being kind and firm at the same time is important. Let them know about surprises, even good surprises, because some people don't like surprises. I don't like surprises. But if you have trauma in your background, surprises can be super scary. Have connection rituals. I've seen so many videos of teachers that have this greeting handshake, and they have different handshakes for every kid. That would not be my connection ritual because I can't remember 32 different handshakes. But lots of people have lots of ways that they connect with every student every day. Be emotionally honest with your students. Otherwise, you teach them not to trust themselves. So teacher says, Mrs. Flowers, you mad? And Mrs. Flowers says, no, I ain't mad, go sit down. Mrs. Flowers is lying. And now this kid has to decide whether they're going to believe their teacher or whether they're going to believe themselves. So what Mrs. Flowers can say is, I am mad, honey, but I'm not going to hurt you even though I'm mad, and I need some space right now. So stop telling kids that you don't feel how you feel, because it causes them to doubt themselves and their understanding of the world. Avoid being inconsistent and irregular. Don't bully or name call, obviously. Don't call on kids who you know have some anxiety to present spontaneously or to talk spontaneously. Let them know, hey, we're going to be talking about this in third period, or we're going to be talking about this after circle time. And I know you have some really good ideas about this. Can I ask you to share one of those during that time so that you're not putting them on the spot when you know that they're a kid who feels scared? Avoid not following through, which we should always do, and avoid being unpredictable. For students who can't self-regulate very well, all of the self-regulation tools that teachers are learning in positive discipline and in all other models are really helpful for all kids, whether they have trauma or discouragement anyway. So I really believe that we should put them all into every day, every classroom. They're good for me. I stand up when I'm presenting. I move around, I rock, I do all of these things because they help me feel better. And I'm allowed to because I'm a grown-up and nobody can say, Aisha, sit down. The fact that a kid has that same need and can't express that need in the same way doesn't mean that they don't have that need, and doesn't mean that they don't deserve space to do what helps their body feel good. So coming up with a few regulation tools, whether it's like, okay, we're all gonna jump up and do 3 jumping jacks, or we're all gonna do 3 deep breaths, or whatever that is. Coming up with whatever those tools are and giving kids space and time to use them, and then doing them as a class frequently, every hour, every 30 minutes or so, because they only take a few seconds to calm the nervous systems of the kids who need their nervous systems calmed. Talk about feelings a lot. Use, it looks like you felt blah, blah, blah when this happened with you and that other student, just so that they can get emotionally literate with their language. Give kids choices. We talked about that already. Don't punish or threaten. Don't trivialize feelings or behavior. Something often happens between 2 small kids, and we often hear adults saying, that wasn't such a big deal. No need to be upset about that. They're upset, and they get to be upset about it. And little problems are not little to little people. So it's important to recognize that their feelings are real, their feelings are valid, and our job is to validate them, not to trivialize them or to try to make them change how they interpreted a situation. For students who don't believe they matter, it's important that we encourage them as often as we can. We do that through compliments and appreciation circles. We do that through asking them questions and learning about them as people. We do that by calling them by name. Calling a person by their name and pronouncing their name correctly is one of those ways to say sawubona, or I see you, you matter. And then kids will try to shut you out, because kids do try to shut you out. Don't let them. Don't violate their boundaries and get all up in their space, but don't let them push you away, because when they push you away, you have validated that they don't matter. LaTysa, you ready for me to show this video?
Yeah, go ahead. So take a look at this short video and just think about.
Pull in, punch all the way through. When you feel the pain, go all the way through. That could be a barrier in life or anything. Punch hard. You gotta punch it hard enough. Punch through it. You feel pain? Shake that off. Let's go. That's what this is about. Good. Let's get to that. Why are you crying? That's what this is about, son. It's okay to cry. We cry as men. Why are you crying, though, son? Come on. Tell me, why are you crying? It's called a test for a reason, but why are you crying? Go ahead, son. Because what?
Because it is harder to do with my left hand.
Okay, good. But you did it, though. You punched him with your left hand. You know in life there's going to be things harder for you to do than other things?
Yes, sir.
And you know those things that may appear to be hard to do, you're going to have to do as a man, regardless. And it's going to take tears. It's going to take the blood of Yeshua, Jesus, and your sweat to break through it. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
So I don't mind you crying. I cry a lot too. You know what I'm saying? All right. So I want you to you're pulling your blow. I don't know if you're facing fear or you're feeling that you may not make it. And we all face that from time to time. And when as soon as we hit resistance, we want to stop, right? Because it's hurting. We feel that pain. We're like, I'm not going through this no more, right?
Exactly.
We have to go off as men. It's going to be very painful. Do you understand?
Yes, sir.
Being a black man in this country, you're going to need mental fortitude. You're going to have to be strong here more so than him. You understand?
Yes, sir.
Good. You can do it. You just gotta put your mind to it. And it's good to cry so you can work through that emotion. So when it arises again, you can push it to the side and do what you gotta do. You understand?
Yes, sir.
All right, good. Let's see what you got. Breathe easy, dig. Hard. Tell me what hard as you can. There you go. Always dig deep. And you may not be able to break a habit or whatever the first time. Keep fighting, keep going through it. And that's where you're going. You understand?
Yes, sir.
Good job.
All right, so I showed that clip. If you guys were able to really interact, my question would be, what did you see? What did you see? And so what I saw was something that was empowering. And in the style of parenting that we teach in positive discipline is connection before correction, which is empowering. It's about mutual respect. And when you have a relationship, which oftentimes for communities of color is one of their highest values, is not the object, but the relationship. So when you can connect with young people, when you can connect with your students, when you can connect with the children, it's empowering to them because now they feel that their feelings have been validated. And so what I saw in that clip, I saw an instructor, a JEGNA, a mentor, get down in this level. He really acknowledged how he was feeling. He connected with him. He shared some experiences and stories, and he did not negate how the child was feeling. He invited him to have those emotions. And after he connected with him, he then began to give him instructions on how to overcome the barrier or the obstacle that was preventing him from being successful in what it was he was trying to do. So I saw all those things. So what life skills was this young man learning, right? One that he was learning self-awareness. And he was also learning that his emotions had meaning, right? And so sometimes we don't give them the space to have their emotions, but in this clip they did. So next slide, please. I think we did it. So some empowering considerations to have would be one, is the control held by the parent or the adult? Does the focus move from the problem to the power of the relationship? Does it create risk of resentment, revenge, or retreat cycle? And if you don't give children the space or make that connection with them, or rules, you have these rules or constructs before you have an actual relationship, you're going to see that resentment. You're going to see that regression. You're going to see that resistance. And so, and if you are not having empowering considerations, it does not encourage a young person to take responsibility for their actions or to initiate a repair. And the last slide, please. So I hope that in attending the session that each of us takes time to reflect on our own biases from the beginning, some of those historical contexts that may be out there still, right? So we just need to have an awareness of our own biases and how that impacts the way that we engage and the way that we connect with young people who are in our care or who we have the opportunity to interact with. And so, and as we briefly touched on this, we know that children learn through play and relationships, and those are the places where they build the necessary skills that they need to form positive identities of themselves and others. So I implore you to check your biases and make sure that before you make a decision that may impact a child or their family and set them on the trajectory of the preschool to prison pipeline, that you really establish, what is the function of the relationship that you have with a child and family. Next slide, please. And so here it is, rules without relationship. That is an equation for rebellion, resistance, resentment, and regression. And so connection you should make before you try to correct or give directives for a child. And especially if they do not have those foundational blocks of development established, or if they're off, if they've been disrupted by trauma or adverse experiences. And because a lot of you are educators, we want to say thank you. Children spend a lot of time in your classrooms or in your centers. And so we want to make sure that we are creating positive childhood experiences for children and students in our care. Thank you.
Two minutes to spare. If there are any questions in the chat, Sam, if you could share those with us, that would be great.
Seeing that got it. Lots of thank yous. Thank you so much. An incredible presentation. We're getting some good comments. No questions yet.
All right, well, I guess if there are no questions.
Well, we have one that just popped up. This is a question from Amanda. How do you differentiate between giving a child space to process or self-soothe and give them too much distance, leading them to feel defeated?
So I'm assuming that this question means, like, if I go towards a child to provide them with support and they say, no, leave me alone. I'm assuming that that's what the question means. And if that's what the question means, I would say that because we were going to make time to be with that child during that moment anyway, that we stay with them at a short distance. So I would go, a few steps away and I would say, I'll be right here for the next few minutes in case you change your mind and want to talk. And if you don't, that's okay. I just want to be close to you because I would like to give you that support. And then after a few minutes, you might ask again, do you feel ready to talk to me yet? And if they say no, I'd say, okay, I'm going to go do whatever I'm going to go do. Come get me if you need anything, and I'll be back to check on you in 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 20 minutes. So I think the point is to be continually communicating that I'm here and I'm not going far away and I'm giving you space. And if I do step a few steps away because I have to, because I need to do the rest of the stuff in class, then I am coming back to check on you because you matter.
And Amanda says, very helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you all. You guys have a great rest of your conference.
All right, take care, everybody.
Thank you.